This is the third day of this June 1981 7-day sesshin. And today we will read different letters by Zen Master Dawi, collected in a book called Swampland Flowers, Letters and Lectures of Zen Master Dawi, translated by Christopher Cleary. We'll just read very few excerpts from his biography. It's quite lengthy and it could constitute a teisho in itself, but today just a few excerpts. Dawi, he was born 1088, died 1163, was born into the cosmopolitan world of the Sung dynasty. It was an age when both rationalistic philosophy and practical invention flourished, when printed books multiplied and the arts reached a mature sophistication still admired today. Communication and commerce intensified. 5 Chinese cities had populations over 1 million. Talents from all over the country were drawn to the brilliant circles in the imperial capital. A lot of historical things are very interesting, but we'll leave this out right now. Chan Buddhism in Sung times was outwardly flourishing, and it had arrived culturally and socially. It had arrived. The impact of Chan teaching, Chan always is the Chinese word of Zen. Zen is a Japanese word. The impact of Chan teaching and style had been felt up to the highest level of society, and many highly placed gentlemen of affairs considered themselves adherents. When Dawi lived, some 400 years had passed since the early greats of Chan's florescence had opened mountains. Some of you may have been here for a teisho on Nansen, how Nansen, after a deep enlightenment experience, went up on a mountain. For 30 years he stayed up there. He felled some trees, cultivated the land, and his guests were the farmers and peasants around there, and woodcutters. It's what's called here open up a mountain. 400 years later, Dawi lived. "400 years had passed since the early greats of Chan florescence had opened mountains, clearing land in remote spots with their followers to farm for their livelihood." One doesn't know, one wasn't there, but D.T. Suzuki writes about these early Zen monasteries that they were truly democratic units. And the master always farming and working right alongside the monks. Now there were large official establishments with revenues assigned by the state. Recognized adepts would be summoned by imperial invitation, in quotation marks, to take up residence and teach at these centers. Control over the possessions and the capital of these places could become the object of conflicting desires and power struggles. Established Buddhism was certainly not free of the taint of worldly ambition. Dawi's teacher, Wan Wu, often exclaimed how numerous phony Chan followers had become. Writes of Dawi's early doubts as a young man. Actually, it says even at an early age he was considered remarkable throughout the vicinity at the age of 16. He left home at 17. He dropped his hair, having his hair shaved as a monk. Now we skipped something and it says, but he had doubts about the 5 sects, five main sects of Zen at the time. I don't know how many there are now. Since originally there had been but one Bodhidharma, why were there so many schools? By nature he was exceptionally talented and not bound by convention. At 19, Dawi began his travels following the traditional practice of Chan, of visiting the various communities and seeking instructions from the teachers there. Several incidents and dialogues are related with different teachers, which we will skip. His last teacher was Wan Wu, the compiler of the Hekigan-roku, the Blue Cliff Record. Incidentally, this is not written in here. I read it someplace else that Dawi, when he became the successor of Wan Wu, after his teacher's death, took it upon himself to burn all the blocks on which the Hekigan-roku had been printed, destroyed it, for fear that students would just read and memorize and not understand. With the result that the things were sort of recompiled later and not quite the original. So we don't really know what the actual original of these koans are, which always must be borne in mind, and there's so many translations. Every translation is different, so many versions. So ultimately one can only rely on one's own understanding, if there is such, and if not, then to question. Wan Wu brought up Yunmen Umon's saying to Dawi, quote, "East Mountain walks on the water." And Dawi had come to grips with it. That was his koan. East Mountain walks on the water. Dawi offered some 49 replies, but Wan Wu didn't approve. One day Wan Wu had gone up to his seat to teach the assembly, that's the teacher, and he cited Yunmen or Umon's words and said, I am not this way. If someone asks, what is the place where all the Buddhas appear? I just say to them, from the south comes a fragrant wind, producing a slight chill in the recesses of the palace. Hearing this, Dawi emptied out and thought he was enlightened. It's an interesting way of putting it. He emptied out. No thought left, no image of Dawi, Yunmen, Wan Wu, or Chan. Wan Wu investigated and found that though Dawi had managed to get before and after cut off, so the aspect of motion does not arise, yet he was settling down in purity and nakedness. Or settling down in emptiness. This is such a frequent thing that happens. Someone has experienced emptiness, and then one gets stuck there. Is there still an experiencer of this emptiness? Who calls it that? Who finds it to be so? There's still the word, the name, the experience of it, then continue questioning who and moo. Don't get stuck anywhere, in fullness or in emptiness. So his teacher told Dawi, it wasn't easy for you to get to this stage. Too bad that having died, you are unable to come back to life. Without a doubt, Words and phrases are great disease. But haven't you seen the saying, quote, hanging from a cliff, let go, and agree to accept the experience. After annihilation, come back to life. I couldn't deceive you. You must be aware that this truth exists. End of quote by the teacher, Wan Wu. Dowie said, just based on today's attainment, I'm already joyous and lively. I can't understand anymore. But his doubts returned. So one day Dowie said to his teacher, I hear that when you were at Wutsu's, you asked about this saying. I wonder what Wutsu said. Had heard about some dialogue of his teacher with his teacher that was a very significant one. And Dowie's teacher laughed out but did not answer. And Dowie said, at the time you must have asked in front of the assembly. What's stopping you from saying it now? Wan Wu said, I asked the meaning of, quote, having words or wordlessness. Both are like clinging vines on the tree. Both words and wordlessness are like clinging vines on the tree. Wutsu said, describe it and it can't be described completely. Depict it and it can't be depicted accurately. I also asked, continued the teacher of Dowie, how is it when the tree falls and the vines wither? How is it when the tree falls and the vines wither? And Wutsu said, it comes along with it. At these words, Dowie was released, saying, I understand. This concern with the tree falling and the vine withering, with death, this great concern of Dowie's still reverberates through his teachings, his letters to his students, always referring to, does one understand where one comes from, where one goes? Does one understand about birth and death? And we've taken here one of his talks to his students. It's not from this particular collection. There's a strong translation of it by D.T. Suzuki. And this is Dowie addressing his monks. Whence is birth? Whither is death? He who knows this whence and whither is said to be a true Buddhist. But who is the one that knows birth and death? Who's the one that suffers birth and death? Who is the one that does not know whence birth is and whither death is? Who is the one that suddenly comes to the realization of this whence and whither? When this is not thoroughly understood, the eyes rove, the heart palpitates, the viscera writhe, as if a fireball was rolling up and down inside the body. And who is the one again that undergoes this torture? If you want to know who this one is, dive down into the depths of your being, where no intellection is possible to reach. And when you know it, You know that there's a place where neither death nor birth can touch. Here's a letter on mindlessness. Always gives a name to whom this letter was directed. Unfortunately, we do not have that particular person's letter. An ancient worthy had a saying, quote, "To look for the ox, one must seek out its tracks. To study the path, seek out mindlessness." One has heard quite often, or read in Zen sayings, this word mindlessness. It is no other than what is talked here, called here, not knowing. Not referring to one's archives, files, for understanding. To study the path, seek out mindlessness. Where the tracks are, so must the ox be. The path of mindlessness is easy to seek out. So-called mindlessness is not being inert and unknowing like earth, wood, tile, or stone. It means that the mind is settled and imperturbable when in contact with situations and meeting circumstances. That it does not cling to anything, but is clear in all places, without hindrance or obstruction. Without being stained, yet without dwelling in the stainlessness. It's all very easily said. What is this imperturbable mind? Some people mention that even though there are incredible thoughts racing on top, the who is there. Or the moo. Questioning, should I do something about these thoughts? No, because if you do, then you are engaged in the race yourself. And then the moo or the who is lost. Then one gives energy to these racing thoughts by thinking they shouldn't be, which is adding to them. So can one be in touch with this imperturbability? No matter what goes on in the top story. Viewing body and mind like dreams or illusions, yet without remaining in the perspective of dreams and illusions, empty nothingness. Viewing body and mind like dreams and illusion. What are they anyways? At this stage, but images of oneself. My body, whose body? A pain is not an illusion. But if you call it pain and react to it in habitual ways, it's already one step removed from what is there? What is it? You don't know what it is. Can one from the very outset see whether it's possible not to know what a pain is? Which doesn't mean to ignore it. By no means. It's there. It's real. Don't please tell me I'm asserting reality here. It's out. It's there. But I will not call it a backache, because it may not be. I don't know. I really don't know. This person found from the very outset that it was the only way to live with this pain. Not to know it. That knowing was, then it became an incredible conflict. I don't want it. It's bad. It's dangerous. What's going to happen to me? This is this old thing I know from before. And when one doesn't know, then it isn't that old thing from before. It is what it is. Not knowing. And who can it merge with that? Because one is that. People report that all of a sudden there's incredible energy. It's the energy that doesn't go into all this other crap. It's gathered in the not knowing, which embraces all of that. Yet without remaining in the perspective of dreams and illusions, empty nothingness. Beware of establishing a perspective of nothingness. Nothingness is not nothingness. The word is not the thing. Nothingness means no image, no me. And therefore the fullness of action. The fullness of responding. Without knowledge of emptiness or fullness. Only when one arrives at a realm like this can it be called true mindlessness. No, it's not lip service mindlessness. You haven't attained true mindlessness. And just go by the verbal kind. How is this different from the perverted Chan of silent illumination? Must be that this writer to whom Dawi is answering has described his arrival at mindlessness. Silent illumination. Later, many 100 years later, used very frequently by Hakuin, who was very fond of Dawi's style and writing. Can see a kinship there. The footnote here says Dawi uses silent illumination in a pejorative way to criticize those who emphasize stillness and quiescence in themselves as the ultimate, without making empowerment through enlightenment the standard. Well, without making empowerment through enlightenment. Seeing into the truth. Not just dwelling and wallowing in this silent illumination. I don't know how long one can wallow in a thing like this, the wallowing itself is not silent illumination. Holding on is not silent as someone who's holding, who underneath must be quite agitated and fearful of darkness. Dawi continues with a quote, "Just get to the root, don't worry about the branches." Somebody else said, if you want to take care of a tree, you don't water the leaves, you water the root. Emptying this mind is the root. Emptying it. in one fell swoop, so that not even the thought of emptiness remains. Which is not an intentional act. That is the fullness of the me wanting to do something like that. Once you get the root, the fundamental, then all kinds of language and knowledge, and all your daily activities as you respond to people and adapt to circumstances, through so many upsets and downfalls, whether joyous or angry, good or bad, favorable or adverse, these are all trivial matters. The branches. If you can be spontaneously aware and knowing, meaning understanding, as you're going along with circumstances, attentive, awake, then there's neither lack nor excess. If you can be spontaneously aware and knowing, with a capital K, as you're going along with circumstances, then there's neither lack nor excess. Here's another one that is called, the title is, Don't Consciously Await Enlightenment. Whether you're happy or angry, in quiet or noisy places, you still must bring up Chao Chu's saying, a dog has no Buddha nature. Here we don't work with this whole koan. Whether happy or angry, in quiet or noisy places, bring up Hu or Mu. Above all, don't consciously await enlightenment. If you consciously await enlightenment, then you're saying, right now I'm deluded. If you wait for enlightenment clinging to delusion, though you pass through countless eons, you'll still not be able to gain enlightenment. As you bring up the saying, just arouse your spirit and see what principle it is. What is this Mu or Hu? If one eye peeks out for enlightenment, you can't be totally involved in the Mu or in the Hu. Then there's a division, and much more than that. Impatience, disappointment, comparison, a whole trip. Constantly take the two concerns, dash, not knowing where we come from at birth, and not knowing where we go at death, dash, and stick them on the point of your nose. Doesn't need to be this doubt for everyone. Everyone has their own. Whether eating or drinking, whether in quiet or noisy places, should make scrupulous efforts from moment to moment, always as if you owed someone millions with no way out, which at that time probably was a dire thing. Or clapped in jail or even beheaded, I don't know. Dao wouldn't use this example, it wasn't an incredible predicament to be in, to owe someone millions. It means probably generation after generation after generation, still indebted to the creditor. enslaved, unfree. Make scrupulous efforts from moment to moment, always as if you owed someone millions with no way out. Your heart sorely troubled with no opening to escape. No opening to escape. Can these openings be plugged? Not plugged through repression, but plugged through understanding. What leakage of energy means. It means no energy. If there is no leakage, then there is tremendous energy. No escape. Which means facing whatever yearns to be faced. Whatever has been kept under pressure. The pressure of our whole upbringing. For generations and generations. Doesn't mean to start analyzing oneself. It is not what is meant here. But the fear, allow her to be there. Don't escape. You don't know what you're afraid of. You don't know what you're escaping from. Maybe nothing frightening at all. It's only that you listen to your thoughts all the time and they paint nice, frightful pictures. So you stick with thinking. Fear is not fear, pain is not pain, terror is not terror, and panic is not panic. It's moon who? What is it? I will not run away. Because the running is the terror, the running is the fear. And the thoughts can paint ever new imaginative hells. They don't have to be imagined, they're right here, all around us. Searching for birth that cannot be found. Searching for death that cannot be found. As long as you think of death and try to think it all out, let me think this death through for once. That's not death, that's thinking. Death is no thinking. Dying to thinking. Not fighting it, but questioning moo without taking refuge in thinking about oneself, one's future, one's past. Questioning a who, not knowing one's future. Not hiding in one's past. Searching for birth that cannot be found, searching for death cannot be found. At such a moment, the roads of good and evil are immediately cut off. When your awareness has gotten like this is precisely the time to apply effort. Contemplate this story right here, not the story about mu. Oh, who? Well, Taoyi says, a monk asked Chaochu, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? And Joshua said, mu, or no. As you contemplate this, mu or who, don't try to figure it out. Don't try to explain it. Don't demand clear understanding. Don't take it verbally. Don't construe the raising of it as the principle. Don't fall into emptiness. Don't consciously anticipate enlightenment. Don't take your understanding from the explanations of the teachers of our school. Very dangerous. Or to relive some of these stories one has read so often. And subtly deceiving oneself that this is one's own experience. Don't drop it into the bag of unconcern. Well, I seem to be incapable, so maybe I better not care. That's dropping it into the bag of unconcern. Whether walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, just constantly call the story to mind, or question or who. When you keep your attention on it fully, when verbal discussion and intellectual consideration cannot reach, and your heart is agitated, when it's like gnawing on an iron spike without any flavor, then you must not falter in your intent. In your work, let's say in your work, intent always has this intended goal, it's implied. Then do not falter. When you get like this, after all, it's good news. Haven't you read the ancient worthies saying? Quote, Buddha preached all teachings to save all minds. I have no mind at all. So what's the use of any teaching? One person came up to Dokusan and said, I've heard too many teachings. Is it all right to work alone? For a while at least. By all means. What if there were no teachers, no scriptures? But there was this predicament, this doubt, this urgency, this needing to find out. What would you do? You would work on your own. And you would find out. Because you would depend on nobody and nothing. And that's already tremendous energy when one doesn't have to depend. Dependency saps us. Sentient beings' obstruction by evil deeds is serious. Bowie continues. No sooner do they get out of bed each day than their minds fly around in confusion, thinking of fame and profit. And please mind you, well, let me first finish the sentence. Somebody told me you never finish a sentence. Thinking of fame and profit, they take up the false concepts of others and self, continuing unbroken like the links of a chain from morning till night, without ever growing tired of it. Thinking of fame and profit, they take up the false concepts of others and self. Now don't simply say, I've renounced fame and profit. I'm now a Zen person. Gave all my things away, including my sewing machine. I don't want any fame. Is that so? Is that so? Don't be so easy in telling about yourself and giving yourself a new image of the imageless one. Don't you want a little raksu? There's no end to our wants. They may change their coloration, but they're still wanting. And aren't there these others who wear them? There obviously are. It's a fact. But how does one see them? And how do people wearing these see themselves and see others? This is very, very important to look into as the occasion arises. And not say, I've settled this thing once and for all. Then you don't see. If perchance they think of entering our school, they think about it intellectually and immediately want to understand it themselves. You hear something, sounds terrific, you read a book. Boy, I want that too. Quickly, snap of a finger. After all, sounds good. It sounds the instant school, not the gradual school. Since the judgments of the mind's conceptual discrimination do not apply here, they get annoyed and already want to give up, saying, what reason is there? People like this are beyond counting. But you're not this way, Shunyuan, companion of the path, companion in the path. Knowing all the empty falsehoods of this defective world, with singleness of mind and intent, you want to understand where we come from when we're born and where we go to when we die, right where you are. Right where you are. Since you don't know where we come from, you don't know where we go either. Wait till you're like a man drinking water who knows for himself whether it's cold or warm and does not accept the judgment in the mouth of someone else. Then for the first time, you give your own approval. It's for this that you have sought my instruction. You've taken up my pen and written freely. I have taken up my pen and written freely, producing a bunch of trailing vines. However, things do not arise by themselves. There must be a reason. If you understand this only as creeping vines, entangling complications, how will you get it? If one hears some of these words read and spoken, and only thinks it's a bunch of trailing vines, then one still lives in the intellect. Can one see where these words come from? Can one be there? See what these words point at, and not take the words for the words. That's always the question. Can one be right there with the teacher? Then there's no teacher, no student. And words are no words. We'll leave this one and just read one more, which is called Who is in the Way? Your letter informs me that your root nature is dim and dull, so that though you make efforts to cultivate and uphold the Dharma, you've never gotten an instant of transcendent enlightenment. The one who can recognize dim and dull is definitely not dim and dull. Where else do you want to seek transcendent enlightenment? After all, gentlemen of affairs who study this path must depend on their dimness and dullness to enter. Depending here means must awaken to the fact that one is pretty dim and pretty dull. That's the first step. It's an enormous step. Dimness and dullness can never discern dimness and dullness. What is that awareness? It's there for an instant and we squander it by saying I shouldn't be dim and dull. And the dimness and dullness immediately continues. After all, gentlemen of affairs who study this path must depend on their dimness and dullness to enter. Remember, we so often talked about Dharma gates. Every instant of this state of body-mind is a Dharma gate. If one doesn't condemn it, or deny it, or escape from it. But if you hold to dimness and dullness, considering yourself to be without the qualifications for the path, then you're being controlled by the demons of dimness and dullness. Since those with commonplace understanding often make the intention of seeking transcendent enlightenment into an obstacle set before them, their own correct understanding cannot appear before them. Let me read this again. Since people often make the intention of seeking transcendent enlightenment into an obstacle set before them. He doesn't even say into a goal set before them, but into an obstacle set before them. Their own correct understanding cannot appear before them. And this obstacle does not come from outside. It's nothing else but the boss man who recognizes the dimness and dullness. Thus, when Master Wei Yen was dwelling constantly in his room, he would call to himself, "Boss," and also respond to himself, "Yes, be alert, I will. Hereafter don't fall for people's deceptions, I won't." A little daily dialogue with himself. Fortunately, since ancient times, there have been such models. Just arouse yourself right here and see what it is. Right here. The one who does the arousing isn't anyone else. He's just the one that can recognize dimness and dullness. And the one who recognizes dimness and dullness isn't anyone else. He's your own fundamental identity, it says here, or self, or nature. True seeing, beyond judgments, beyond all opposition and conflict and division. Taoyi says, this is me giving medicine to suit the disease, having no other alternative. Briefly pointing out the road for you to return home and sit in peace. And that's all. If you stick to dead words and say it really is your fundamental identity, then you're acknowledging the conscious spirit as yourself. Conscious spirit here meaning one's thought inundated consciousness. Thought and concept inundated consciousness. If you stick to dead words and say it's really your true nature, then you're acknowledging consciousness, words and concepts as your true self. And this has even less to do with it. Therefore, Master Changsha said, quote, "People studying the path don't know the truth. It's just because they've always accepted their consciousness, their words and concepts and opinions, and what they've read, the holy writ, the scriptures, the words of the teachers, the words. People studying the path don't know the truth. It's just because they've always accepted the consciousness. This, the root of birth and death, over immeasurable ages fools call the original man. This consciousness, the root of birth and death, fools call the original man. It's just the idea of the original man. What I said before about depending on dimness and dullness to enter is this. Simply see what the one who can know dimness and dullness like this ultimately is. In other words, if there's attention to the fact that there's dimness and dullness, moo, make it moo and hoo. Don't fight it. Don't wish it away. It's there. What is it? Moo. Hoo. And that there's no leak. Just look right here. Don't seek transcendent enlightenment. Just observe and observe. Suddenly you'll laugh aloud. Beyond this, there's nothing that can be said. Moo and hoo are not sayings. They're not words. They are not knowing. We will end here for today. The four vows.
All beings without number.